Hope everybody's doing well on this Mother's Day. Maybe you are with your mom today. Maybe you're going to go see her later, or you saw her this morning already. As we were crossing the road, I said there's a lot more traffic on Sunday. What's going on? And of course, we thought it's Mother's Day, right? So our moms are very important, and they should be. And today we'll be in our series. Still, we've taken a little bit of a detour, taking a look at this idea of expectations. And so we'll be in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2. Now, at the beginning of 1 Samuel, we see it's really kind of the beginning point for Israel to begin to develop this idea of having a king. And now, this wasn't really the perfect setup. All they really needed was God. But God was going to give them an imperfect leader. He was going to do this through the prophets kind of guiding this and anointing those leaders. And Samuel was going to be one of those guys. And it was all because there was a woman who didn't have any children yet. And she wanted children. And so we'll see here in the text that she prayed to the Lord, but she prayed for a specific reason for something. And thus, Samuel comes from this situation. And so this was written around 950 BC. And it was written to a people who were hearing about what had already taken place through a previous time while they were in captivity, while they were divided about to go into captivity. And this is really setting the stage for a future time for Israel when everything was going to be broken and where they were really going to need some encouragement. And I'd like to think that as we read this now and as they were looking back, reading the story about Hannah and how she prayed to the Lord for a very specific reason, to be a mom, so that this person who would come, young Samuel, would be a big part of guiding God's people at the beginning of the Kings. And so that's where we're going to be. But before we get into that, I wanted to read something I found online about expectations. As we talk about expectations for moms and women, and too often I see just a lot of things that just don't match up with the Bible, and a lot of things that I just feel like weigh really heavily on you. And I don't like that. I read that and I go, I don't know. I'm not sure that's what a biblical expectation is. And so there was a lady by the name of Sarah Buckley Friedberg. You may have seen this before. It was a social media post that was put out a couple of years ago. And it's kind of long. I want to read some excerpts for you. It starts out like this. And this is her words on society to young moms. She says, you need to go back to work 6 to 8 weeks after having a baby. The baby that you spent 9 to 10 months growing inside of your body. Go back to work before you finish healing or had time to bond with your baby. Keep your mind on work and not your tiny, helpless baby. It's being watched and cared for by someone else other than you. Make sure to break the glass ceiling, by the way, and excel at your job. You can do anything a man can do. It's your job to show society this. Show the world that women can do it all. Rise to the top of your career. Also, lose the baby weight and get back into shape as quickly and as gracefully as possible. Make sure to get 8 hours of sleep a night so you can work out, work, and care for your family. But also get up at 5 a.m. to work out, unless you want to do it after your kids go to bed. And of course, then you need to get ready for the next day. Oh, and by the way, you need to sleep. Maintain a clean, Pinterest-worthy home. Yes, I know what Pinterest is, by the way. So, I think you do, but you need to maintain that house, she says. Take the Christmas lights down, recycle, be Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and the birthday planner. Be fun, be firm, read books, have dance parties. Maintain the schedule for the entire family, birthday parties coming up. Make sure to have presents. Ensure the kids are learning to swim, play an instrument, read, ride a bike. Be good human beings. Eat vegetables. Wear sunscreen. Drink enough water. Say please and thank you. Don't forget, they need to dress as their favorite book character on Monday. And wear something yellow on Thursday. Kids need a lot of doctor's appointments also. Monthly if they're babies. Every time they're sick, specialist appointments, especially if any of them have extra needs. Sorry, you're not on vacation, by the way. And because you used it all, taking your kids to appointments. You should go on vacations, though. It's good to relax and unwind from work. It makes you a better employee, too. Don't forget the kids need healthy meals, and so do you. You are trying to lose that extra 20 pounds before swim season. That requires meal planning, grocery shopping, and meal prep on the weekend, but also hang out with your kids on the weekend as well, since during the week, you only get to hang out with them when they are exhausted and angry because you made the wrong spaghetti for dinner. Date your spouse also. It's important to keep your relationship alive and fresh. Go out 1-2 times a month. Good kid-free time. Oh, hey, you should have a hobby too. It's important to have you time. Also, be well-read. Keep up with the latest pop culture and TV shows, and keep an eye on politics, and be able to discuss at least one of the above on the small chance you are out in public and encounter another adult. Necessary to have a small conversation with them. Make sure to have friends. Social time is so important. Surely there is an hour or two left in the week after all the work, appointments, exercising, cooking, scheduling, cleaning, imparting lifelong morals, and learning onto the kids as usual. Get off your phone, turn off the TV, enjoy life, enjoy your kids. These are good times. Make sure to love every minute of life, because it will all of this will be in the past sometime soon. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. When I found that, I gave it to my wife, and I said, "Can you read this and just tell me if any of this resonates?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." And so I feel like, I don't know, maybe you in the room, maybe somebody that's close to you, you're seeing all of this, you're experiencing many of the unimaginable, unattainable, unrealistic expectations that are on wives and moms. And we've seen this for years, but I think we kind of continue to expect a lot of these things, right? Instead of maybe allowing grace to be there in the situation, instead of allowing when things aren't always perfect, when you're having a rough day, or a rough week, or a rough month, or a rough year, maybe take a step back and say, you know what, for moms, it's okay to not be okay also, right? And if you're not, then ask for some help, or at least reach out and say, "Would you pray for me?" Because we all need that from time to time. And so with that, we'll jump into the first point, stumbling in sorrow. Stumbling in sorrow. And this is verses 1-5 of 1 Samuel chapter 1. And this is what I call the life's not what you had hoped. What now? Where do you go from there? If I were to guess, we probably have our own expectations on our lives. Ladies, you probably think of things maybe the way that you wanted them to be, or they should be, or they could have been. And a lot of those things God never puts on you, right? He never says you have to do this, or you have to be that way, you have to look like that person, you have to live like this person. So we'll see what what Hannah does in the situation. And stumbling into sorrow, in verse 1, it says, "There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zoam, of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tehu, son of Zuph, and of Ephrathah. He had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man used to go up year by year from the city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. For the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all their sons. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb." So we see here in the situation, Hannah's obviously upset. This is a difficult situation. In ancient culture, this guy named Elkanah, he had 2 wives, which was a problem from the beginning. We see that many of the patriarchs, the father of the faith, in the ancient world, there would be the first spouse who maybe wouldn't be able to bear children. They say, well, we've got to continue the line. We're not going to be able to pass anything on. None of our property, nothing's going to belong to us unless we have a male heir. And so their solution to that was to take matters into their own hands. And that didn't always work super well. And it resulted in this situation where Hannah was grieving. She wanted something right and desirable, and it wasn't even necessarily because of society's expectations. And we'll see that when she goes to the Lord, she's gonna do something that maybe a woman in that position who had never had any children would do. She was going to ask the Lord for a child to give him over to the service of the Lord. And one of the things you need to remember about Elkanah is his family was in the Levite tribe, which you can only be a priest if you're in the Levite tribe. So this whole situation, the Lord is setting up, and we'll see where the text leads from here. And Chrysostom said this about Hannah. It's interesting. He said, "For many years Hannah was grieved and distressed," and the meaning of "for a long time, yet she showed no impatience, nor did the length of time undermine her values." This would have been hard, wouldn't it? It would be hard in our culture, right? Unable to bear children. Those are some things that many of us or our families have had to deal with. And in this society at this time, this culture, it would have been unimaginable. You would have had no value. In fact, this is one of the primary ways that women had value in ancient culture, and she did not. So here in verse 6, we see this there's this crushing expectation of, instead of trusting in God. And so it says here in verse 6, and her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? And so what happens here? Now, we may not, ladies, you're not going to be in the same situation here. There's not going to be another wife, right? We don't do that now. And so, easily enough, maybe if we could compare some of the pressures on us. I automatically go to social media. What happens? You go on the social media feed, and you start scrolling down, and then you're like, oh, I wish I was like that, or oh, I wish I had that, or oh, I wish I looked like that, right? And so there's all these thoughts and things that go through your minds and hearts. And in a similar way, Hannah was dealing with some of these things. I love Elkanah. Guys, most of us, we're problem solvers, right? We try to make the situation better. Something's wrong. We're like, how can I fix it? And sometimes, if you didn't know, sometimes it's better just to listen, right? And I've been in that same situation where there's something going on. I want to be able to fix it, and I'll say, something will just come out, and it's just not right. And so Elkanah, he tries here. And he says, Hannah, why do you weep? Well, he knows why she's weeping, right? And why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Well, he already knows the answer to that, right? Probably not a good question to ask, by the way, guys. Am I not worth more to you? Well, this is where she found her value in culture and in society. What society would tell her: if you can't have this, if you can't do this, then you are not valuable. But wait a minute. Then we talked about something last week. David shared about really the image of God and how everybody's worth something. We're all equal in God's eyes. We're all valuable. And so even then, He's looking down, and although He's allowed this situation to take place, in fact, He's been a part of the planning of all of this, because it says the Lord had closed her womb. And so do we believe that sometimes there's situations, sometimes there's things that aren't preferable for us, sometimes things that we won't even enjoy or even painful to us, that God allows in His sovereignty to take place so that we might become closer to Him, right? And it's many times in these difficult seasons where here's the response. There's this being grievously irritated. In the text here it says she was irritated by her rival. And it's hard, isn't it? We think whether maybe when we look on those websites, we look on the internet, we look on Pinterest, we want our house to be a particular way, or we want to be able, I wish if I could just cook like her, if I could just, have that kind of house, if I could just keep it this way. And instead, we turn around and it's like there's clothes on the floor and things are dirty, and we're like, why is the diaper genie filled? That happens to us all the time. We're like, how did that happen again? It's like we just changed it, right? And there are these things that we're like, why can't it just be this way? But there was a season for Hannah that she was walking through, and God was teaching her something. Although Elkanah, he walks back in and he goes, he kind of gives her the Jerry Maguire principle, Hannah, do I not complete you? Right? And there's no answer that needs to be given to that question, right? Here's the second thing. Seeking God first. So what does Hannah do? Well, she's trying to understand what will be these right purposes of God. What's His plan? I think she understands the situation from what the text tells us. She knows that her family is in the line of the priest, the Levite tribe, and so she's going to offer a very specific, very, I think, encouraging for us prayer. And it says here in verse 9, and they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh. Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Now, maybe we think, well, this was a big ask for Hannah, and it was a big commitment for her as well, but she desired a child, maybe not so much for the social acceptance, maybe it's not so much for the value there, maybe not even for an heir that would be able to partake in part of her family's leftovers, part of their fortune, but for a son who would be dedicated to the Lord, Samuel. And because of that one prayer, we see this young man who comes out of the situation just after he's weaned, after he's a little kid, barely able to walk. We'll see he's going to be taken back to the temple and dedicated to the Lord for exactly what Hannah said. And I think it's around these times too. I've seen so many like the graduation posts and the things going on, and parents are like, we're about to send them off to college. We have one of those here, and those times are difficult, right? We're trying to practice our comfort level with releasing our kids, which is probably not very good, right? I think about our kids right now; they're so little. I'm like, it's going to be so long before we have to, say goodbye in some form or fashion. But we got to be with Christy's grandmother yesterday. She's 98. She'll be 99 in July. And just a lot of things happening there. And she's been having a hard time. And so continue to pray for her and our family with our Grandma Kitty. And so our girls got to be with their great-grandmother. And I'll show you a picture at the end. Just kind of shows you part of that situation. But she always would tell us this phrase. She would say, don't wish your life away. Right? And so for Hannah, she was grieved, right? She was in pain and she wanted something, but I think she desired it for different reasons than we desire things, or we want particular things. And it continues in verse 12. It says, as she prayed before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth, and Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, go in peace, and the God of Israel will grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, let your servant find favor in your eyes. And the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. People always tell me at times, especially young people, the Bible's boring. I really don't know what should I read. And come to the story in 1 Samuel, and it's almost this comical interaction between Hannah. She's praying and expected to be this very spiritual moment, which it was for her. And the priest comes up, and he's not the greatest of priests of all time, right? We'll see that Samuel actually ended up taking his and his son's place. And he comes up and he misunderstands the situation. And what have you been doing? You drinking? Like, what's going on? You must be intoxicated. And then she has to explain the situation. No, I've been praying in my anxiety, my vexation. Been praying to the Lord. Been asking for a request of a child. And in verse 19, it says, they rose early in the morning and worshiped the Lord, and they went back to their house, Ramah. And Elkanah knew his wife, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. So Hannah knew exactly why a baby had come on the scene, right? She had been unable to bear children before, and she has this special request of the Lord. It doesn't say, Lord, will you give me a child so that I can have status, so that I can have popularity, so that we can have an heir. It'll be from me. So that all the other ladies, with social media, but so all the other ladies won't look at me and say, oh, I wonder what she did. But the Lord allowed this for a season. And when the child came, she was able to find true joy in something. And it wasn't in everything that she had already attained. It wasn't in finding her value previously in something that she hadn't. But she found it in a child that would be given over to the Lord. And so that's the third fill in the blank, finding true joy. And so the Lord fulfilling her request brought this. And in verse 21, really 21 through 23, you see there's this finding joy in goodbyes. And so it says in verse 21, the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vows. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And so Up until this time, this may have been between the ages of 3 and 5. She wasn't going to leave him as a baby there, but at least someone who could walk around. And, I think about the development of, all of our kids. It's just fresh in my mind. I can't imagine taking my little child, toddler, they can barely talk, and they've been walking around for a little bit maybe, but you're just like, no, don't go over there. All right, don't get too close to the street, okay? Now don't right? I can't imagine as Hannah, her only son, she's asked from the Lord, she's dedicated him to the Lord, and then now it's time to release. And we have such a hard time, right? We're thinking on the cusp of going off to college, starting a new career, of finding your spouse, starting a family, and we're like, I don't know, I can't. I'm not there yet. I want to be able to let go, but I'm not there. And so she finds joy in this releasing of her son for a greater purpose. In verse 24, this is really this prayer of celebration. I love this. And it says, and when she had weaned him, she took him up with her along with her 3-year-old bull and an ephah of flour, a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. And they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, "O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who is standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I've lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there. So this is this prayer fulfilled. It's like coming full circle. And this is, really only a few years later as the child's come, she's dedicated to the Lord, and it's time to release. You think maybe in Hannah's situation, she would have been like, no, actually, I changed my mind. No, I'm going to hang on to him. I know I said that, but just kidding. God, no, this was planned in advance, right? Hannah would come to the Lord. She would pray. And there would be this time to release, as difficult as this is for us and has been. I don't know from experience, but I know that time will come to let go, right? To go, okay, God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know you do. And I can't imagine at that point at 17, 18, 19, whatever it is, releasing, like for Hannah, letting her little toddler go into the temple of the Lord and to be trained to be the priest. Well, she didn't know yet, but God was going to do some amazing things through Samuel's life. And there was going to be this great legacy that was going to come. And I'll read this before we jump into the last point. Augustine said, "Strive in prayer to overcome this world. Pray in hope, faith, love, earnestly, and patiently." You imagine how long Hannah prayed. This prayer was fulfilled. There was this greater purpose that was going to come for her, letting go of her son. Even though if I had to guess, maybe she didn't want to fully. But she knew this was going to be impactful for God's people. And here's the last thing. Knowing a good legacy. Knowing a good legacy. So more children were given to Hannah, but she took joy in the Lord. So in the midst of all this, before she had children, when she had Samuel, when she was to give Samuel back over to the Lord to serve him, and then we'll see here that some greater things are going to happen because of this. There's this greater legacy that she was going to have. So in verses 18 through 21, it says, "Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod, and his mother used to make for him a little robe, take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, 'May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord.' So then they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord." So there's more children that come. There's this, interesting part of the story that God didn't necessarily have to allow to happen. He had closed her womb for a season, and then as she came to the Lord and prayed, the Lord said, "Now is the time." And it's a young man who's going to come out of the prayers of a faithful woman who put her trust in the Lord instead of everything else, right? Instead of finding joy, instead of finding fulfillment in everything else that society has to offer, in trying to be something that maybe the culture wanted her to be, she said, "What I really desire most of all is to be someone who trusts the Lord. And I know the only way this is going to happen is to ask the Lord for that." And then more than that, she didn't just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to ask for a child or children so that I can feel better about myself, but I'm going to give them back to the Lord. Can you imagine? I don't know. I'm not a woman, I haven't been there, but what I do know is how important that is. And in the time to be able to release as we think about this, as she stumbled in the sorrow and she sought God first, and then she really found her true joy in being able to do that and being able to trust the Lord. And then we see that she was able to know good legacy. And I don't know where you're at right now. Maybe that's been hard, maybe with kids or with something else, or just not trying to find our joy in everything else, right? The life has to offer. You know, guys who do the same thing and maybe being macho or having a good job, or having lots of money, or and maybe it is kids. And we think, well, I finally arrived. This has happened. But for Hannah, that's not what it was about, right? It was about honoring the Lord, and we'll see how influential just her prayer was. In Samuel's story, if you continue to read on Samuel, who trusted the Lord and led God's people through some difficult times, through some good kings, and so on. And so what I want to do is just give us this opportunity to close with a video. Many of you have been gracious in allowing me to film and do some things and kind of share your stories. And I know we lost really somebody who was a mom and a grandma to a lot of us recently. And so Bryce is going to share through video on that experience and what the Lord taught him. So go ahead and turn your attention to the screens and we'll finish up.
Hello, my name is Bryce Johnson. I'm a member here at First Baptist Church of Elba, and I have a story of a struggle I would like to share with you and how God got me through it and the peace I had with God. My story is about an elderly parent who is, or was, in the, come to find out, in the final stages of life and the things that happened leading up to that. My mother had a couple of serious infections, which led her to be into the hospital, rehab, back home, back into the hospital, rehab, back home, hospital doctor, back home. And the struggle of that was obviously the physical part of doing it, taking care of her when she was home, and the emotional and spiritual part of that was that just a roller coaster ride of what should I be doing? Am I doing everything right? And praying for a lot of wisdom to do things right and taking care of her. And obviously physically not sleeping real well because you're sleeping light to hear if everything's okay with her, and just kind of that situation. To say how God has got me through it. He gave me peace through it. He gave me the ability to be able to make decisions which were definitely out of my comfort zone, and he also provided me with a support group that was able to relieve me at times and to provide some wisdom when it was needed, and just be an emotional support for me. Whatever struggle you're going through, God is able to get you through it, and praise be to God. Ask for wisdom, ask for His help, and He will provide it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing, Bryce. And so as we close, I want to share one more picture. Wherever you're at in life, I don't know, we can all probably relate to this. We got to be with Christy's grandmother, and you guys can go ahead and show the picture if you can, if it's loaded. Yeah, there you go. And so again, yeah, she's 98, moving out of the house that she's been in for a very, very long time, handling everything really, really well, and which we're thankful for. Had a lot of good time with her yesterday as we went back and forth to Binghamton, and we took that picture. And I was just thinking about this morning. It's like, we don't always get to be in those places. You got 4 generations of, well, 3 are already moms, 3 more. My hope will be moms one day and bring grandchildren for us. But my question is, what really brings you fulfillment in life? What brings you hope? What do you rest on? What are you looking for to define yourself? Family is great, and to have a legacy, but I wonder what kind of legacy we will have. Will it be one of people who know God, who are faithful to Him, and say, God, whatever you want, whatever your purposes are, whatever your plan is, that's what we want. And I hope that's what we all want today. Maybe the Lord's still working on your heart. My guess is maybe that's true. I'm still working on mine in that space. But I want to just give us the opportunity before we step away. And I didn't say at the beginning because we haven't been on the live stream, but my name's Michael and I'm the pastor. So if you watch it later, then you'll know. But if you're here today and you're like, I don't know, maybe this doesn't make sense to me if you listen later on, then maybe you just need to take that first step of putting your faith and trust in God through what Jesus has done for us on the cross. If you haven't done that, I'd love to talk to you about it, and I'll be here afterwards to do that. So, stumbling in the sorrow, seeking God first, finding true joy, where is that? And maybe we can know a better legacy if that's where we rest. And trusting in the Lord, His plan, His purposes for our lives. Hannah certainly did. I hope we can too. Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time. I'm thankful that these expectations of the world don't have to sit on us, don't have to rest on us. And God, at the end of the day, no matter what's going on in our lives, and no matter what perspective we have, whether we're at the front end as a young person, whether we're at the end as an older person, looking back, I pray that each and every one of us would think about this legacy that we can have, that you want for us, one that's centered on knowing you, God, and pleasing you. I pray that our expectations would be those that are the ones that you have, and not the ones that the world offers, which we know won't make us happy, won't bring us enjoyment in the end. I pray that this legacy of moms here would be one that is about knowing you and then bringing up those children, those families who will seek after you as well. And everything else, well, doesn't matter a whole lot, but we're thankful that we have this right perspective of Hannah and her prayer to you and the fulfillment of that and bringing Samuel forth. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Before you leave,